Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 199 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my regular co-host, Ian Cummer. He is still streaming live from his dacha in Crimea, where it is 7 p.m., I believe. I've been pretty good with the times. And then I got Greg Rosen, our special guest today, streaming live from Chicago, Illinois, where it's 1 hour difference for me. So it's 9 a.m. here. I'm thinking is it 2 hours difference, Greg? 11 a.m.?
It's 11, yeah.
2 hours difference, 11 a.m. We have our show today is entitled, Will the Trump Ceasefire Hold? So we left off on Friday. It was a big cliffhanger. I had predicted that previous Tuesday, Trump would end civilization as we know it. And of course, I was wrong. That did not happen. Trump declared that, negotiations were afoot and that, he was going to have talks either that Friday or Saturday. So we met on Friday. We didn't know how the talks were going to go. But Saturday, the talks were held. Vice President Vance showed up in Islamabad, Pakistan. And after 21 hours, he declared nothing was resolved. So there's a 14-day ceasefire in effect. I think that 14-day ceasefire is in effect from that Tuesday. I believe it's from the previous Tuesday. But the negotiations, did not resolve anything. And Vance kind of said that, it's fine. The U.S. is going to be better off than Iran will be, without a deal. And so it's going to, it's not good for either side, but it's going to hurt Iran a lot more was the threat. And then they initiated, so that was on Saturday. And then on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, it was declared by Trump and CENTCOM that the United States was going to do a blockade of Iranian ports. So no shipping that is going to Iranian ports will be allowed to, traverse the Strait of Hormuz and, go out into the wider ocean. So nobody knew what that meant. I didn't know what that meant, and it's still unclear what this blockade meant and what is going on. So let's first of all talk about the blockade, and then we can talk about the greater ceasefire in general. But who wants to give their 2 cents specifically on the issue of the blockade? I can start.
Go ahead and start.
Okay, I wasn't ready to start. You called my bluff. So
someone else can start. You don't have to start. We can have someone else start.
No, I can start too. Whatever is more convenient. So no, it's not clear. I want to always go back to the bigger picture, and the bigger picture, as I see it and understand it, is all of these things going on the planet are being driven, by the same forces and the same motivation, right? And so you have a Western empire in decline, being threatened by global rivals, and it is lashing out, trying to escalate things in order to eventually, remove these obstacles and threats to Western global hegemony. As this plays out, I expect that escalation and then continued, turmoil and conflagration, to what end it remains to be seen. But I just have not seen a real like there's no sea change in the West thinking, hey, multipolarism is inevitable. We will resign ourselves to it, and we will start living in peace and mutual prosperity and cooperation with these rising powers that currently we're trying to destroy: Russia, China, Iran. So until we see that, I think what is clear is that whatever happens are opportunistic strategies designed to further, this basic overarching interest that is causing, all these things to take place. So as far as a ceasefire goes, I think that the war in Iran is going to continue. I think that the embargo, even if it's more like a leaky sieve right now, might tighten at some point. But what we see is the United States rearming. We see an air bridge of C-17s and cargo planes, traversing from the United States to Europe to the West Asian theater. So they're essentially just resupplying anti-missile munitions that have been depleted. They're resupplying their, attack ships with targeted, what are those things called? Targeted missiles. There's a word for them, that the standoff weapons. They've really used them all in the first salvo, and now they have to ship them all in and reload.
Exquisite weapons, right?
So they have the best weapons ever. They're magnificent. They're beautiful. They're beautiful weapons, Greg. The best.
Exquisite.
So they're using the ceasefire primarily to rearm. They're also using the ceasefire to moderate the stock market, to keep the price of oil from getting too volatile and causing too much pain to the global economy. But no, I fully expect that there is no. It's foolish to believe that a ceasefire is signals that there's going to be peace in our time. Like, we are just so far away from that. So we're at the very beginning of this, what I perceive to be, a global conflagration aimed primarily at China. And we really haven't even seen any movement, overtly and directly aimed at China. We might see a tightening of the blockade aimed at Iranian oil going to China. But as Greg mentioned before the show, we have not yet seen that, because he was tracking a Chinese tanker. I don't know if it was a Chinese flag tanker, but it was definitely a tanker taking oil to
Malawi. Yeah.
Malawi flagged tanker taking oil, to China, that was not interdicted. And you said, Greg, it's not out of the woods yet, right? Like, there's still
right. Yeah, it's still off the coast of Oman, outside of the strait, but near Iran, probably much closer than the Navy, U.S. Navy.
And that's just one tanker, and who knows? I mean, they might not have their stuff together. They might not really care just yet about really tightening that blockade. But it's definitely an escalation. The declaration of a blockade is an escalation in itself. And this, again, is what we would expect to see. A slow, strategic, tactical movements, not to de-escalate, but to escalate. And sometimes it might look like a de-escalation because, you've declared a 2-week ceasefire. Well, that's good news. That's a de-escalation. Well, not really, because they're just rearming. And while they're doing that, they're making these declarations of an embargo and stuff. So
what do you guys think of? What do you guys think of the commentary that the U.S. is depleted more than it wants to be? Not just like needing resupply, but depleting weapons beyond what it wants to have in storage for the next war.
That's my take. I actually don't really. I mean, and I wrote that with the post that went with this video. I'm of the opinion that the USA does not really want to go back into a war with Iran. I mean, that should have been the lesson of the 12-day war. But for some reason, they had to go at it again. The whole issue with the argument of, is a ceasefire is just to rearm. Well, it's the problems are deeper than just, reloading the ships, reloading the bases. The issues that like you said, Greg, the munitions themselves don't exist. They just don't have enough of them. And to to fix that problem, you need months or years, more like years. It's not something a little 2-week ceasefire is going to fix. So, I mean, we can buy the arguments that they are going to accept another bad deal and then kick the can down the road and try it again. I mean, that's vaguely possible, but I think Iran's caught on to that. So they want a peace deal that has, very serious ramifications, even just right out the gates, like withdrawing military assets from the Middle East, a UN resolution, which, I mean, there's just a lot of serious steps. So it's not just to kick the can down the road. The U.S. have to make very
permanent control of the Hormuz.
So, yeah, Ian's dacha is under regular drone attack by Ukraine, and so often his internet is spotty. But no, that's interesting. So I mean, it sounds like Ian is directly just total disagreement with everything I said, which is great. But yeah, no, and I think he's pointing to a real problem. Ian, you're pointing to a real problem with Western ability to manufacture weapons and missiles.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I cut out mid-sentence. So guys, I sometimes have a shaky internet connection in Crimea. So if I cut out, I apologize. But yes, to finish my thought, I don't think Trump is excited. I don't think the Trump team wants to, go back into a hot war with Iran. They do want to make a deal, but they're running into the same problem they do with everyone else. They have this idea that the U.S. just makes demands and the other side accepts it. That's what they were expecting with Russia. They show up in Alaska, the USA makes demands. We want you to do this, this, and this. And Russia just accepts it and doesn't have their own demands that they want met. And even at the time early in Trump's administration, I was actually very optimistic about the Russia situation because there's just such low-hanging fruit. You had a Russian government that's very open to cooperation with the USA. Is very, for some reason, still very pro-US in comparison to Europe. But I think Trump did get offered a very generous deal, but they didn't accept it because they had this idea. Well, you're supposed to do this, this, and this, and they had these ideas of what the borders were going to look like. That all these, demilitarization. They had a lot of goofy ideas. Trump and his real estate agent, he had Nagit Witkoff, had these very goofy ideas in their heads, and of course it didn't go anywhere. So I think it's likely we're going to have something similar with Iran, where there's not a peace, but there isn't exactly a hot war either, because it's just this this paralysis. I think we're going to see this paralysis in the American.
How long do you think that'll last, though? I mean, you think it's going to last forever?
Well, not forever.
When will hostilities resume?
Well, I think it's
true. Or it's moved to the oceans now. Sorry, yeah.
Well, it's hard to say because we're seeing the same thing with Russia, right? Ukraine is not won, and Ukraine's also not collapsed. With Ukraine, the risk there is that Russia just wins and takes everything, and so it's like, well, we should have accepted a deal when we had the opportunity. I think there might be something similar with Iran also, but stickier. It's stickier to say exactly. I do think it seems like the U.S. does not care if it collapses the world economy, which I would say is significant because it does destroy the USA's credibility. It completely destroys the USA's credibility. I know. I see all this cope from the MAGA channels. They're like, oh, Trump is playing hardball and all this usual, copium they tell themselves. But I don't think people in Japan and Australia and the Philippines, all these other countries where you're being told that, to shower less, literally.
Okay, yeah, hopefully Ian will come back. So
use less water because some.
So a lot of people are unhappy. Like, I'm kind of thinking that, the United States is ultimately wanting and will crash the global economy. And I shouldn't say the United States. I think it's the transnational oligarchs who are interested in that because they know that's the only way they can really do harm to China. So that's, again, my framework. But Ian has a completely different framework. And he cut out while he was explaining it. But we actually absolutely agree that, a lot of the planet is not going to be happy with the oligarchy crashing the global economy, for their own benefit, for the benefit of this transnational oligarchy. So Tom Robbins liked your thumbnail, Ian, and Greg had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, on the other side, as you pointed out, Trump seems and the government to be really worried about the markets and managing them as much as possible. And a lot of jawboning, all the lying about the big traffic through Hormuz.
Yeah, no. Trump definitely is trying not to appear like he is interested in collapsing the global market or taking blame for that. But he does obviously take blame for the damage that's been caused so far. I mean, we had $116 a barrel oil before he, declared that diplomacy, and that before, minutes before his deadline to obliterate Iran and, destroy them as a civilization. So, and he's also probably profiting off of his pronouncements. His hyperbole causes the markets to go up, and then his hyperbole the other way, oh, peace in our time, causes them to go back down, and he's probably making a killing for his friends and family. So, but it's a good point. As far as my framework at the moment, obviously, Trump has not, owned destroying the global economy. And my guess is it's going to be, marched out over a long time frame, months or maybe even years. We're just gonna, they're gonna slowly turn up the heat. We're gonna be like frogs boiling. It starts out lukewarm or room temperature, and then it just slowly gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and we acclimate to it. And so what have we acclimated to now? From $60 a barrel to $100 a barrel. So that's the new normal. And then from the new normal, they'll roll out some more, and they'll just acclimate people to it, and give people time to do workarounds and whatever. Like they'll give their allies Japan alternate ways to deal with the pain. But anyway, Ian, you weren't really done speaking. You kind of got cut out.
I cut out. Yeah. I apologize again. So I was saying, these other countries where they're having serious energy issues aren't going to look at the USA as a savior, so it hurts U.S. credibility. So it's a question of how long can the U.S. play the game? I would say for a long time, because the U.S. has its own options, right? The U.S. is a net importer of oil, but it has options. Europe, not so much. And I think therein lies the threat that they will, if they get upset enough, they might defect, right? They could defect to China. I mean, they're not going to defect to Russia's corner because they see them as blood enemies, but they could defect. They could make threats the USA would have to take seriously, like defecting to China's corner economically. I don't know how China would respond to that. I'm not even sure what defecting to China would entail. Like, do the Chinese care? I mean, because do they look at France and say, "Oh, this is an ally," or do they look at France and say, "Well, it's a market"? Those people, those right. So they go in Temu and order T-shirts and rollerblades and knickknacks and I don't think the relationship can really go any deeper than that. But they might still make the threat.
I mean, I noticed excitement in the Chinese media about selling electric cars to Britain, which is a big coup.
You remind me, Greg, of a video I saw. It was a Ring doorbell, and some poor mentally disturbed British woman rang the doorbell of a gentleman, and then you saw the whole video, and she was just out of her mind saying, "You are a threat to national security with your BYD car. Don't you know China's using, your car to surveil us and to, destroy us?" So she was just out of her mind, Looney Tunes, buying into the anti-China hysteria. But yeah, Ian mentioned knickknacks and Temu and T-shirts, but no, come on, Ian, give him some credit. Like, BYD is the biggest electric car manufacturer on the planet, and I think Honda just recently did a tour of Chinese plants, and they're like, "Oh, we can't compete with this." He said that publicly and openly. And to your point, guys, I mean, Spain, the Spanish prime minister, just was in China doing exactly that after Trump rebuffed him and was really scolding him and threatening Spain, Spain went fucking straight to China to show, the U.S. that, you better, watch how you treat us. But so my perspective is this is a bit of theater, right? I don't trust Spain. I'm sorry, and maybe this government is legit. Like maybe this government really believes that. And if that's true, I just think the government will get toppled and they'll put in somebody. I mean, that's just how it works. So I don't think there's a credible threat that Europe is going to switch sides and join China. But I think what's going on, and we've talked about this before, Ian, like I think this theater where Trump is threatening, Europe, and where Trump is trying to be really friendly with Russia, it's all designed to turn Europe into a warfare state and to justify the oligarchs in Europe, allowing them the justification to destroy the social safety net and to put all that spending into militarism. Because, like Hegseth said when he went over to Europe at the beginning of last year, or was that this year? Yeah, it was this year, the beginning of this year. Talking about a division of labor, and so really, I think that's the plan. That it's to weaponize Europe and have Europe continue a proxy war with Russia after Ukraine, uses up all of their, people. And even to just do the heavy lifting while Ukraine continues the proxy war. Do the heavy lifting. Europe needs to do the heavy lifting in supporting Ukraine. So this is what Hegseth's plan is, and they're justifying this by allowing the politicians in Europe to threaten their population. It's like, hey, we have to do this. We don't have the United States protecting us anymore. We have to protect ourselves. And so, based on national security and the obvious threat from Russia, which they have indoctrinated, it's non-existent. It's like the non-existent threat from Russia that they have indoctrinated into everybody's minds is what they are leveraging to get rid of, the great social programs that Europe is famous for, and turning it into a warfare state, which most working class people in normal conditions would fight, and they would oppose that kind of a thing. But they're not opposing it because of, the theater that's going on where Trump is, pretending to not care about Europe and pretending to be friends with Russia and abandoning Europe and threatening to abandon NATO. And he might leave NATO. And that would be the coup de grace. Is that a word? No. The coup de grace. The coup de grace would be leaving NATO, and then Europe would have no choice but to say, oh, shit, bye-bye welfare states. So I think it's totally likely that he would leave NATO. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that happens. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't, because, he doesn't really need to, but it would definitely help this effort to weaponize Europe against Russia. Anyway, so that's my analysis that we've talked about at length. Daryl says, I didn't even think about it until right before the show that I was wearing a red shirt, and I was like, I always wear a black shirt, but I was like, you know what? I don't even need to change. I think red will be okay. But thank you, Daryl, for liking that.
So 2 other U.S. allies that are important are meeting with Russia, I've heard, South Korea and Japan, who also are very dependent on Persian Gulf oil. So, that's...
Yeah.
I don't have further information on that. I didn't actually hear that news. When did you see that?
I think Mercouris has been talking about it. Is where I heard it.
No, I haven't heard that either, but I mean, it seems obvious what's happening. Right. It's where the oil is. They're understanding that they might not have access for much longer to Gulf oil, and they're dependent. They're hugely dependent on Gulf oil. I don't know. Let's find out. South Korea and Japan, what percentage of their energy imports come from West Asia? I mean, I'll bet you it's over 50%. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and we can check, but so they're hedging, and they're doing what prudent government would do, and they're thinking, if there's catastrophe in West Asia and we're no longer able to access oil from West Asia, what are we going to do? And so they're obviously trying to negotiate something with Russia, and Russia is being empowered and enriched because of, the oil market, the energy market is being squeezed by Trump. And those countries that aren't energy rich, like Europe, are suffering because they're scrambling to figure it out. And it really sucks for Europe because they're enemies with Russia. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Japan, allegedly, this is just the Google AI. I don't know how accurate this is because I just looked. It says over 90% of Japan's oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and more than 70% of South Korea's. So I guess those headlines about the gas stations just actually running out and having to close because of demand aren't an exaggeration. That would make sense. And I see the big danger to the world economy is demand destruction, because if you just do not have the oil to keep something running, it just shuts down and then it's gone. So even if you bring the oil back, it doesn't immediately the demand doesn't immediately because it doesn't exist. Those companies closed, those industries closed. You can eventually bring them back, but it's not an overnight thing.
Yeah, and that brings up the precariousness of the global economy and the interconnectivity of the global economy, and how dangerous it is to fuck with energy supply chains, which is what Trump is directly, overtly, purposefully doing. And then you got to ask yourself, to what end? What is going on here? Why is this happening? And so, we have different ways of coming to those answers. Greg, what's your way of coming to that answer?
I don't think it's primarily about China or Israel. I think it's actually about Iran, and the U.S. is losing and flailing. That's my take.
Can you elaborate, sir?
Sure. If it were about China, the U.S. would not want to waste all of its weapons and expensive, exquisite armaments on Iran first. And this is very messy.
Yeah. Would you say that Syria was about Iran, or was Syria about Syria?
Both. I mean,
but not okay.
Syria's,
so hold on.
Syria was the first, I think, post-World War II regime change attempt. We've been working on taking control of Syria since the 40s. I think because of its location. So, I mean, different rationales have changed and shifted.
Yeah. I mean, so no, my question was going to be, so Syria was both about Syria and Iran, but wouldn't you say that Iran could be both about Iran and China, or you would say no?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Syria,
I mean, Iran is a target in its own right, and also because it has this relationship with China.
Yeah, no, and I think Syria was the same, right? So the air corridor. So they really needed to take over Syria so that they had an air corridor so they could bomb Iran. And so Syria was a stepping stone to Iran, but Iran, as supplying 90% of its oil to China, is also somewhat of a stepping stone in, monopolizing global energy and weaponizing that monopoly against China and cutting China off of energy in order to contain their economy, and do their best to weaken them as a peer adversary. Because what is that called? The big defense policy paper that came out in January 2026 identifies Chinese containing China as the number 2 priority of the United States, only second to protecting and defending the United States homeland. So the United States homeland is the number 1 priority, to protecting and defending it, but the number 2 priority is containing China. And so I think, we ought to, I mean, and that's, again, not my only piece of evidence, but I think it's one of my strongest pieces of evidence that we have to not ignore what the United States, as the headquarters of the global transnational oligarchy is actually saying, and the policies that they're putting in place. All those are very important to understanding what motives are propelling things.
But that's aspirational too. You have to remember, I mean, like we've talked about, every administration for, since Obama said our priority is China, but we can't really focus on it. Because if you notice of what Iran's targets are in the Middle East, it's not primarily Israel. It's oil industry, tech industry, U.S. This imperialism. There's huge amount of U.S. investment in the area, so we can't leave that alone.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure we disagree on anything. Iran definitely targeted Western assets, United States assets specifically, economic assets, energy assets, and UK assets. Like they were hitting UK-owned oil fields in Iraq, for instance. No, that's absolutely true, and it's it's asymmetric war, it's attritional warfare, and it's Iran's means of deterring further aggression against them. But I don't see any of that as contradictory to my framework or what I'm saying. But I'm always just looking for an argument, and that's probably a personal defect. So you probably weren't intending to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's a good point, though. I mean, it's left the U.S. in a worse position against China, not a better position.
Right.
It's done nothing. It's actually done the opposite. It's also, I think, exposed military weaknesses that weren't as publicly apparent previously. I mean, because if Iran can stand up to, well, the Air Force and Navy, well, I mean, of course, China can. I mean, the Iranian defense wasn't perfect, but it did what it needed to do. So it's like, who is really going to look at the U.S. military as infallible at this point, which I think is, if you're just in the game of blackmail and intimidation, it's really important to seem infallible.
Right.
And the problem with wars is that they come with the risk that they aren't a perfect victory, like with Venezuela. That was a perfect success, which, as it turns out, which a lot of us kind of guessed from the beginning, they had a lot of inside help. But even with those assurances of inside help, it's just there are still a lot of risks to it. And Trump has this pattern of taking these very risky maneuvers, but doesn't seem to realize that there's risk to it. And then in this case, he got told, well, it wasn't a big success. And then he's stuck with this huge problem that gets worse as time goes on, and he doesn't know what to do. It doesn't sound like anyone even briefed him on or if they did, he didn't listen, that there were risks that, you might be 2 months down the road and there's no solution. The strait's closed. U.S. assets there's none of this air superiority we keep hearing about. And U.S. assets can't get close to Iran. And here we are. So I don't know.
And the 13 bases attacked and damaged or destroyed is really stunning. I mean,
yes, I would say
surrounding our enemies with bases is what we do. Sorry, go.
I wouldn't. No, you're good. I wouldn't call them destroyed, but yeah, they are uninhabitable while Iran is bombing them because they don't have those hardened bomb shelters that you need. So there's personnel, and there was a scandal. Those 6 reservists, those Iowa reservists who were killed. There's a statement that they were just working out in the open and they didn't have any shelter.
Oh, wow.
That was something I saw in the media.
Well, we thought we had air defense, right? Isn't that?
That's just the situation because I've been to several of those bases, and that's just the situation that they don't have. They don't have the protection for missiles and drones. They don't.
Were they relying, though, on air defenses? Isn't that the reason? Did you hear me, Ian?
It looks like he's...
Greg, if you're trying to talk, I can't hear you.
Okay.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, probably. With the internet going in and out, the volume will cut off. But we can see you, Ian. We can hear you. But yeah, you might have trouble seeing us or hearing us. But so
I
so
had
I think.
asked.
Go ahead.
I had asked if the strategy for those bases was air defenses instead of shelters.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, and I don't disagree with anything Ian said when he talks about the failure of the effort to destroy Iran. And so those bases, I mean, yeah, was the West thinking that those bases were defensible with just their Patriot batteries or whatever, because they obviously weren't. And again, they should have known that from the 12-day war last year. But Ian, did you have stuff to say? Because I mean, you were making good points, and I didn't disagree with them, and I was gonna just relate them to my framework.
That was it.
So the question is, my question then to you guys, right? Given I'm like, because we kind of agree what happened. Like, it was an embarrassment. The United States lost. Like, they obviously wanted something better to happen as far as the military conflict with Iran. And so the question is, where do we go from here? And so I answered that earlier in the program, when I gave my long spiel about we're just going to have more continued escalation because that's where this is headed. But do you guys disagree with that? Like, Ian, you were thinking that it could be a legit peace in our time because there's no military option. And what is Trump going to do? Why would he continue this catastrophe further? I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, it's just I did this flip flop from being very pessimistic because I said it's just like there's no off ramp for Trump. This is going to go up to ground invasion. Well, it does seem like that maybe a small scale ground invasion was already attempted, which is what a lot of people are suspecting with that. That weird rescue attempt where the pilot was never named, not a single photo of him. So a lot of people are wondering about that. So maybe it was just the results. And also, everything's heavily censored. We still don't have a lot of information about exactly what happened either. So we just don't know how good or bad things went. But I'm erring on the side of it went pretty bad, and they're not in a hurry to go back into it. Because if they go back into it, then it's just more of the same thing. More aircraft lost almost every day. They were basically up to a rate of one aircraft lost a day. And it was just disastrous. I don't know where, if they go back, if he what's he going to do? Bomb Iran again? Well, as I said in that last show, after he made those threats to end civilization, well, if he's not talking about nukes, you cannot defeat Iran just by using conventional munitions. You just can't. We don't even have enough of them. It's not physically possible to do. So where can he? So I'm not saying it's impossible he'll go back to war. It's just how? Yeah. Where can he go from here?
Well,
war on the sea looks like, seems like the idea is now economically strangle Iran.
Yeah. And I mean, how long did it take them? They put a big effort to topple Syria with all of the ISIS, being trained in Turkey. And that took over a decade, right, to come to fruition and to be successful. And so I don't think they have that kind of time, but we know that they're willing to sit back and just,
we have decades already working on Iran.
Yeah. But from this point on, I don't know if they have another decade, but they definitely, could go for, some strangulation, some non-kinetic, non-kinetic strangulation of, Iran's economy. In the meantime, they can work on Mossad networks and, uprisings and they can try and put in place an alternative government, and then they could open up with more missile strikes against civilian targets that really hurt the people's ability to live, like such as power plants and things like that, which they haven't really done yet. They've only threatened to do. Now, in addition to that, they could also destroy Iran's ability to export oil. Of course, Iran would retaliate and destroy the Gulf monarchies' ability to export oil, and that would reduce West Asia to a non-oil producing region for years, and that would be the collapse of the global economy, which I predicted last week Tuesday, falsely. But all of those things are still very possible. They're very on the table, and with my framework, I think they're inevitable, right? So my framework says this is the plan to cause a global conflagration and justify entirely new a new normal that is a complete break with the past 75 years as we've known it, and then the U.S. hopes to come out on the other side of that in a better position than their current rivals. And so this is kind of what happened during World War II. The United States played it very cool, even allied with the Soviet Union, ostensibly, and they really benefited because at the end of World War II, the United States accounted for half the global economy, and they were able to create a system and just benefit from the exploitation of the entire world. And so, I think that they're hoping to achieve something similar. And again, I don't think it's going to succeed. Like, I think this will be a failed attempt, but, sooner rather than later, they might recognize the failure and admit failure and stop trying. And that's totally possible. But I think they're going to have to at least attempt, utilizing the mechanisms that they've put in place so far, right? So the mechanisms they put in place so far are kind of going to be a monopoly of a global energy, except for Russia. But I think, every day we see more attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. So a monopoly over global energy is going to be one thing that they're going to try and leverage. And then, their weaponization of the first and second island chain that is the lifeline of China's economy, where energy and exports flow in and out. And if you close that in the first and second island chain, you really do significant damage to China's economy. So this is what has been put in place over decades. And I have a hard time thinking that the West is going to accept defeat without even giving it the old, oligarch try. So, when we're talking big picture, I just don't think that we're anywhere near able to say that the U.S. has lost or stopped trying, or the West, the transnational oligarchy. And I think that we're continuing the same trajectory. These are minor setbacks, because ultimately I think they're going to be satisfied with reducing West Asia, incapacitating their ability to produce energy. So that's my framework. Go ahead, Ian. Tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, it's you sound like a salesman for the U.S. Air Force. Like, really, what magic weapon are they going to use to make that happen? I mean, we go through this every winter for the past 4 years with Ukraine and Russia. Russia bombs the hell out of their energy infrastructure. It's like, Ukraine's energy infrastructure is collapsing, and it doesn't. And they make this
okay.
Like
can I just cut you off and address your point? I hear your point.
It goes both sides.
What?
And Ukraine blasts all these refineries at the same time. It goes both ways. I know what you're going to say. Oh, well, Russia's a deliberate strategy or whatever. I mean, but that's both sides. No, Ukraine sends all these drones to blow up.
What I'm saying, it sounds like you're saying that the West is not going to be capable of destroying West Asian energy production. I'm telling you, it's going to be super easy. I'm saying that overnight, the United States destroy energy. They could bomb Karg Island. They could bomb all their pipelines, and they could easily make Iran incapable of selling energy on the global market. And the thing is, what has deterred that is Iran can reciprocate, and Iran can do the exact same thing very easily to all the Gulf monarchies. So it's interesting that we disagree here. I didn't know this was a disagreement we had. Like, I thought everybody understood and acknowledged that this was mutual deterrence, and the only thing that was keeping the United States from doing this was the threat that they know Iran will do the exact same thing to Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar. So, but it's interesting. So I want to see what Greg says. So we have a disagreement here, Greg. So yeah, I always thought everybody knew the U.S. overnight could destroy Iran's ability to export oil. And I didn't know anybody thought that wasn't true. And so what are your thoughts on that, Greg?
I mean, I think you're right. They could destroy Carg Island. And, I don't know how long it would take to repair. Like Ian's saying, a lot of this stuff is turns out way more robust than everybody thought. So, and I mean, all these refineries that Ukraine have hit are largely, repaired and working, not knocked out for years. Well, so I don't know militarily.
I'm not talking about Ukraine and I'm not talking about Russia. I'm talking about Iran, and I'm talking about the ability of the United States to wreck for years Iran's ability to export oil. Now, I think the United States has threatened to do that. Trump has threatened to do that, and Iran is counter-threatened,
right.
Believably so, that, yeah, sure, of course you can do that to us. And if you do, we will do it to all of your Gulf monarchies. And so I think that's the status quo. So to hear Ian say that, that can't happen, I didn't realize anybody took that position, honestly.
Well, I mean, we go through this. It's interesting talking to Marxists and talking to actually neoconservatives, even though you have these kind of polar opposite viewpoints. You both share the same idea of like the means of production is like an object, and if you drop bombs on that object, then it's destroyed, and then it's it's over. It's like the target in a computer game. But I mean, the real resource countries have is people's manpower. You don't so typically 99.9% of the time you just bomb an object that all those people come and they fix that object, which usually isn't difficult. I mean, if you think I blew up a pipeline, well, okay, you blew up you didn't blow up a pipeline, you blew up a section of the pipeline. Even the Crimean Bridge, they blew up the Crimean Bridge, and there are all these, tweets and like, oh, we destroyed the Crimean Bridge. No, you didn't destroy the Crimean Bridge. You destroyed one section of the Crimean Bridge, and then they had it repaired. And I think it wasn't very long. It was like maybe, I don't think it was even a week. It was very fast, how fast they got at least open to partial. And that's the case with most infrastructure, because believe it or not, when they design this infrastructure, they think about what if someone bombs it. That's something they think about, especially if you're in a country like Iran or Russia, or there's a place where you think there's a not zero chance that someone might bomb this. Maybe in the USA they don't do that, but they probably should think about that. And the other issue I want to bring up is I think it's actually more pointed, because Iran was bombing the hell out of Israel, and they didn't really go after Israel. I mean, they could. We said this before the war, and I still believe it. They could make Israel a very bad place. They could destroy it to the extent, because it's not a big country. It's not Iran. It's small and consolidated enough. You could make it a pretty miserable place to live, and it would genuinely take a long time to fix, because there's so many things they could destroy. They could destroy the power plants. They could destroy the desalination plants, which, by the way, both Israel and the Gulf states are much more dependent on than Iran. So if you play this game of hitting desalination plants, it affects the USA's guys more than it affects Iran. So I wouldn't say, Billy Bob, you're completely mistaken. There is a tit for tat. If the USA escalates, then Iran also escalates, and they kind of realized that wasn't working. And I do think Israel is of more value than you give it credit for. That's not entirely correct to say there's this, that Israel is a proxy. I think if there was a lot of suffering in Israel, that would be a political catastrophe in the USA. I do think these people, when these people get on, Hegseth and Kushner and all these Zionists, I do think they genuinely believe the bullshit they say that that's the end times, that we have to support God's chosen people. I mean, I those aren't things. I think we can put words in their mouth, say, oh, well, it's actually, it's the means of production, it's capital. Well, maybe those things are also true, but I think they mean what they're saying when they say there's this very emotional connection to this place. I think it's also possible to believe your own propaganda, because everybody under the age of, I guess, 70 at this point has spent his entire life receiving this propaganda. I mean, if you've been receiving this propaganda over and over since you were a young child, well, I mean, a lot of people are going to believe it, even if they're, upper class, if they're affluent people, they're going to believe it because that's what they were taught since they were babies. So that's my 2 cents.
We may get a test of all these debates soon. If the U.S. indeed does get kicked out of the Gulf militarily, it'll be an interesting test if we still have any use for Israel.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting test because, and actually I said the ceasefire itself was a test, because if Israel was just going to get pummeled and the U.S. interjected to say, well, you know what, we're just going to make a deal with Iran, screw Israel, we'll just make a deal with Iran, right? But for some reason, Israel got tangled up in it, and now we're at this impasse where we can't even agree on Lebanon. And the reason we can't agree on Lebanon is because Israel wants to occupy Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
So
although I think there's a de facto agreement that Israel stopped bombing Beirut, so Iran was willing to sit down.
Yeah, and Iran would not budge on that until they wouldn't even. Yeah,
but they're still
they wanted a full
southern
ceasefire.
Lebanon.
They compromised because Israel's still bombing southern Lebanon.
Yeah. It's weird what kind of a unstated agreement they came to, because Iran did stop launching missiles and drones at the Gulf states and at Israel, and Israel did not stop attacking Lebanon. So that's the reality, and that's an issue. And I mean, there's several ways to explain that that are charitable to Iran and uncharitable to Iran. So
I mean, they may have decided pragmatically, okay, we got proxy versus proxy over there. We'll let it, not block all negotiations.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Iran is probably hoping that Hezbollah is, resilient and strong and is able to defend Lebanon. Yeah. And there's conflicting reports. You listen to Israeli media, Israel's doing really well. You listen to resistance media, and Hezbollah is doing well too. Okay, so Ian, are you still there?
I'm here. Do you want to catch up on some of these comments? Because we have a bunch of comments we haven't really addressed. So we have, let's see, I'm going to go back to, all right, the bird about China. I don't think joining China is on the table. You can buy from China. I'd rather not. The Soviet Union was trying to have its own manufactured goods, a bit worse than what the West could offer them. So the bird's probably referring, who I assume is a Russian, is referring to, Chinese products have a less, they have less of a good reputation in Russia, and that's because actually Russia was the first European country to get a lot of Chinese goods. This was in the 1990s when their own industry and manufacturing collapsed. They got a lot of, let's say, very cheap and low quality imports from China. So a lot of people remember that. It's I don't know if it's, I wasn't there, or I wasn't here. I don't know if it's improved since then. But and then after 2022, when they were sanctioned by most Western brands, again you had the Chinese cars and a bunch of other Chinese.
So Okay, Ian, you dropped out for a sec. But yeah, you were making a comment about, it really did coincide with decades of Western propaganda, calling China a manufacturer of cheap goods. So I know Taiwan had that same, stigma. Everything, as a kid was made in Taiwan, and we knew it was shit when we saw that. You'd buy American flags and it had the little made in Taiwan sticker. Okay, so so the conversation as I was following it has drifted to the comments, but I mean I still had questions and wanted to talk more about the other issues, but
well, go ahead.
but
I was just drifting to the comments because we had a lot.
No,
of
and that's
comments
fine. I don't want to not talk to our commenters. What did you have a succinct thing you were trying to say about this one here?
No, that was it. I'm just addressing each comment one at a time. So that was the point about China.
Okay,
I
I don't
think
believe
it's
that
in
China
relation
is
to our
better than.
comments about Europe.
Okay. Yeah, no, everybody is entitled to have their opinions. So again, my biggest question that I did remain unanswered was because we kind of had agreement on how the war went, and so the question was, well, where do we go from here? And I didn't really hear anything that was substantial. My substantial thing is, we will have escalation. I don't even know if the whole 2-week long ceasefire will hold. It quite possibly could, but then I could definitely see Trump, after he reloads, which is what is going on right now, he will reload with the anti-missiles and he'll be up for another round. And that other round will include targets in Iran that were not hit before. And this will be an escalation, and this will increase the pain on the country of Iran, in an effort to, get them to surrender. So I could totally see Trump, relaunching another round of attacks on Iran, which would result in Iranian reprisals. And quite possibly, again, I think that, Iran's energy exports are very vulnerable. And I think that the United States has avoided attacking them because Iran has threatened that if you do, we will attack the vulnerable export capacity of the Gulf states. And so, Trump did not choose to press that button, which would collapse the global economy for years. But I don't think that it's off the table. I mean, that's my opinion. That's my framework. And my framework is it could take months for us to reach that point. Could take a year, or it could happen within weeks, but that's the direction we're headed. And I don't see anything that suggests that we don't want to go there. It's all escalatory so far, exactly as you would expect if you have the framework that I do, that, we're trying to monopolize global energy. If we can't monopolize it, we'll destroy it. If we can't control it, we'll destroy it. Now, he's trying to control it through a secondary blockade, right? He's trying to control Iranian oil exports through an embargo and a blockade. And so maybe, they're going to prefer that route as opposed to destroying everything that'll be inevitable. It'll for years, destroy the capacity of them to export energy. So he might prefer to try and control it, but that has a whole set of risks. And he might just end up thinking that, fuck, all I can do is this. So that's what I'm going to do. And I think that's where it's going to be, because I don't think there are any other options if you're trying to monopolize global energy and fuck China. And again, that is the goal. That hasn't changed. Based on that logic, ultimately, sooner rather than later, I predict, they're just going to say, fuck it. It's all fucking destroyed. The United States is going to be fine. And we have to pursue our core interests, which is, number one, protect the homeland. Number two, defeat China. And you're not going to do that without plunging the global economy into turmoil. And they don't give a fuck, because guess what? They're going to be fine. The billionaire class is not going to be suffering. They have $1 billion luxury bunkers for a reason, But okay, so I get that is a very narrow-minded, rigid, dogmatic view that a lot of people don't agree with. But what I'm not hearing is any sensible explanation for what the fuck is going on, and I'm asking, and I'm not hearing it. Like, it doesn't make nothing you guys say makes sense.
Actually.
All right, Greg, not you.
What was that?
No. So I'm asking for a coherent explanation and predictions based on some kind of a rational framework that makes sense of things, and that's what I'm not getting. Greg, it's more. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying.
Greg
more,
is confused. I mean, I thought Trump was trying to declare peace and go home, or declare victory and go home, but the negotiations didn't work in that way, and the blockade surprised me. I don't understand where this is going, and unless we're willing to start,
how all of that coincides with my framework, right?
No, because unless you think we're willing to start naval battles with China in the Indian Ocean, no.
Well,
which I don't think the U.S. is up for.
I've kind of likened it to, you're trying to cross the river one step at a time, feeling the stones as you go. And that's going to look chaotic at times, but you know where you want to be and you're moving in that direction. And so that's what I see happening. And I don't see any decision to turn back and not try and cross the river. So
what do the planners think when China sends a bunch of frigates to escort their tankers, because they're not up for losing,
no, they could very well back down temporarily at that point. You could see a back down, no doubt. But they're testing. They're figuring out what they can get away with. They're looking for an advantage. They're being opportunistic.
Well, this isn't a mystery. I mean, if you start interdicting China's shipping, it'll be close to an act of war.
Well, I mean, so I don't know what you're saying. I mean, I agree.
I'm saying your strategy doesn't hold up. I don't think the U.S. let a Chinese tanker go so far. If we take on China's Navy,
what do you mean my
Indian
strategy
Ocean,
doesn't hold up? Because I'm not saying
because the U.S. depleted itself.
The opposite.
And you're saying it's getting ready to. It's just starting a giant worldwide blockade of China. I don't think it's up for confronting China right now.
Okay,
I think we'll
but
see
that's not
soon.
a contradiction. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that could be correct. I think they would much rather. It's called strategic sequencing. You have to take out Syria before you can take out Iran. You've got to deal with Iran before you're in a position.
And the other problem is the U.S. can't withstand this, period. I mean, we can't handle the oil prices going any higher than they are. Our interest rate on the debt will go through the roof, and the U.S. can't handle that. I mean, every conventional political analyst would say, well, Billy, what about the election? Is Trump going to be happy going into the election with gas prices through the roof, losing Congress, spending the rest of his term dealing with impeachments?
Yeah, no, and my framework has always been, I think they want Trump and they're happy to have Trump because he's going to plunge the planet and do some really bad things that the ruling Western establishment can blame on Trump specifically. Meanwhile, he's doing things that, that are in their interest.
Well, who's he doing it for? I mean, the Western it's the U.S. ruling class he works for. And, but they're not going to benefit from this.
Well, when you call
Trump's
a ruling class a U.S.
power.
ruling class, like, I don't know, I have a problem with that framing because, again, there's no ruling class that's loyal to a country. Like that's not true. They're loyal to their class, and they use countries to further their class interests. But they don't have loyalty.
But they only have one country,
people.
Billy. They only have one country. And you can see right now the U.S. is screwing the bourgeoisies of all their allies. Almost every last one of them.
I'm not sure that the European bourgeoisie is that unhappy with slashing Europe's social safety net and getting them, plunging them to war. Because, again, what is the war for? Who's the war for? The war is for their interests.
The Russia war, but not getting cut off of energy,
I don't think
not the energy
getting their
crisis.
airlines shut down because Trump unilaterally attacked Iran is something European
Right.
elites like. Especially because they're so fixated on Russia. I mean, I doubt anybody in Europe is happy that while they're in the middle of this, great crusade against
Existential as
Russia,
they see it.
this existential, I mean, they are hysterical about Russia, and they don't get less hysterical with time. I mean, if I was European, I'd be furious that Trump threw a wrench into it, especially because weapons that were meant for Ukraine are getting sidelined, and Europe's militaries, weapons shipments sent to them are being delayed or just told like, hey, guess what? We can't actually send these to you because we don't have enough for ourselves. I mean, I doubt. But of course, that's not to do with China. I don't think anyone in Europe, and that's I think another issue that that all of the elites of the Western world are all unified against China. I don't think that's actually might be true in the USA. I mean, they're more fixated. I mean, it's possible that the USA is more fixated on China than Russia, but it's not. It's absolutely not true for Europe. They're, so I can't buy the arguments that this is.
They're being dragged. Yeah.
So there's, let me try and summarize then the respective positions, right? So I'm seeing that I'm talking about a motivation. What is motivating all these things? What is motivating Venezuela? What is motivating Ukraine originally? What is motivating, Iran? And ultimately what will be motivating our pivot towards China and our escalations against China? Those are all going to be the same thing. It's the West pursuing global hegemony, right? So that's the motivation. Now you guys are talking about the futility of, the strategy that has these motivations. And like on that, I kind of agree, right? Like, I don't think that the United States can win. I don't think that the Western oligarchy can defeat China, can defeat Iran. I think they have limitations. But I think where we disagree maybe is I don't see them stopping just yet. I don't see them taking the L. I see things escalating tremendously to the point of perhaps global economic collapse, including a tightened trade embargo against China, which we haven't seen anything like that, right? So I'm saying that this is not out of the question. I'm saying it's possible, but it's also possible that the West recognizes the futility of their situation and starts to embrace multipolarism and tries to just get along with peace and mutual prosperity. Ideally, that's what will happen. I don't see that choice being made yet. I just see them trying to. So when I frame it like that, like what do you, I mean, do you guys embrace that, or is my framing of it even wrong? Like, is this a correct framing, or would you guys frame it differently? What I'm saying, our respective positions.
I think the U.S. is rogue in relation to its allies to a large degree right now. I mean, Europe may have gone along with, reconquering Iran, but they would have wanted to be part of it like we did with Iraq. And like Ian's saying, they're preoccupied with Russia and they don't like the energy crisis or the diversion of resources.
So let me address that, because this is a good discussion. So your perspective, your position is kind of like, you kind of are rejecting my summary of a transnational oligarch elite that's pushing things, and you're pointing out that they do have differences, and that the United States, as the headquarters and ultimate power of Western imperialism, is doing things without really getting the consent or the sign on of their vassals in Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea. So I mean, this is again, like, this is true, right? Like, I think the Europeans were happy with the status quo. I think it's Washington that decided the status quo needs to change. But guess what? It's like, you're the Don of the mafia. You get to make these decisions, and your vassals have to just fucking deal with it. And so I agree that they're probably not happy. They're being dragged along. But ultimately, are they going to flip sides and start working for the FBI? or are they going to do what they're told and keep working for the mafia? And so, like, I mean, I don't see how your point is contradicting what I'm saying.
Well, if it's saying it's a transnational oligarchy with vassals, I mean that might be true to an extent, but they didn't act like it. There was clearly not a unified decision.
Right.
Washington, I mean, you kind of said it's like you hedged your statement a little bit. There's either a transnational oligarchy or there isn't. I mean, I think we're getting a little bit into Alex Jones territory that that there's like this giant conspiracy. I think it's fair to say that there's different countries. There is transnational interests. There's transnational capital. That is a thing. But
okay. So my framework, right, is that there's a group, a class. There's a class of billionaires, the ownership class, and they have a class interest, and they identify what their interest is on the planet, and they use states. They control states. They own the governments of states. They own the markets. They own the resources. They own the industries. Then that's the ownership class, and the ownership class isn't have loyal to a state, but they use states. So right now, their greatest, most powerful weapon is the United States, because the United States has the biggest economy and it has the most powerful military. So it is the United States that is the primary vehicle to determine what the strategies are and what the tactics are for this transnational ownership class to pursue their class interests on the planet. And they have identified as their number one class interest is securing the planet under their rule and domination, which means that they have to destroy those sovereign nations that resist them. So this is what I mean by the transnational oligarchy. And of course, it is headquartered in the United States. The United States is their prime vehicle, but they don't have loyalty to the United States. They're not doing things for the United States. They're doing things for their class. So this is the framework. And it seems like when you
But the class is linked to the state. You can't delink it, really, because without a state, they don't have the power.
How am I delinking the class from the state? I'm just saying that they own the state, and
you're saying they don't have any loyalty or interest in the U.S. They need to preserve the U.S. because that's their instrument.
Well, but those aren't mutually exclusive things. Like both those things can be correct. They could be. So what I'm saying is they're not identifying a national interest like the working class perceives a national interest, where the working class, the vast majority of the people in this country, benefit, have peace and prosperity and freedom. Like that is not one of the things that enter into their minds when they're discussing what the national interest is. From them, the national interest is their interest. Their national interest is explained in the January defense paper that says our number one national interest is Homeland security, and then it's defeating China. And we don't really give a fuck about the people of this country. And in fact, we're happy to cause them to sacrifice and make them
pay. Yeah, that goes without saying. It's their class. But what I'm saying is they don't give a shit about the European bourgeoisie either, or the South Korean or the Japanese.
Bourgeoisie are vassals, of course, and they're making those vassals sacrifice. Absolutely. But it doesn't.
So it's
but
a
the point is,
nationalist
it's transnational
US
because
the
oligarchy, the bourgeoisie of Europe are not going to switch sides. They're not going to take China's side. They're not going to join the FBI. They're not happy about the decisions that the Don has made, but they're going to fucking deal with it, and they're going to do what they're told, and they're going to cause they're going to tell their. Go ahead.
Mafia guys snitch to the FBI all the time. So I think even your own
and they get killed.
Analogy isn't true because they snitch.
Orban got killed. Orban got killed on Sunday.
Right, but Al Capone. I mean, if you're talking about Bloody Sunday, I mean Al Capone was too violent and he pissed so many people off. That's what led to his downfall. And actually, the interesting thing, if we bring up Al Capone as an example, he said he was in the Chicago machine, right? Which Chicago at the time was complete. Maybe it still is. Well, it probably still is. Completely corrupt. The government and the mafia were basically just one entity. Al Capone, rises to the top, and he's basically just like, do what I say or I'll kill you. Caused so much bad press, they pretty much turned against him. And what's interesting is that academics, after studied how Al Capone got taken down. It's like, it didn't, the Untouchables and that whole thing to bring down Al Capone didn't actually hurt organized crime in Chicago. They pushed Al Capone to the sidelines. He was isolated. He got taken down and arrested. Everybody else just went back to business as usual. And the media, looked at other things. So it's not really true that in organized crime that they're all, they have this blood code and all that. It's not actually true. They'll switch sides on each other all the time. If you're weak, or maybe you just piss too many people off, they'll absolutely turn on you. And that's in the truth. Same is true for geopolitics. I think the problem with what Trump did is that Trump came into office and he just is like, I'm the pimp on the street. You're all my hoes. Somewhat literally, he just openly disrespected and humiliated which but it maybe would have gotten away with it. But the problem is he turned around and was also weak. I mean, he's breaking his teeth on Iran. So when you're an asshole and you're also weak, well, I don't think that's
right.
I don't think it's gonna
Begging
work out
for
well.
help.
Right. I don't think
So you think his behavior is so egregious that it's going to cause the ownership class, the transnational Western oligarchy, to stop having class loyalty, and they're going to start siding with what? The working class, with China?
Not
They're gonna have
class
more
loyalty. It's not about switching class. It's about continuing alliance with U.S. Agendas.
But there's only two options here. Like, the U.S. is forcing
No,
a
there's
choice.
not. Europe will
The U.S.
become
is
its own
choice. You're with us or you're with China.
Europe is going to go back to what it was historically, its own center of power, I believe, or it's going to try.
I mean,
Europe is fun.
Look at Ukraine. I mean, it's U.S. aid to Ukraine. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it non-existent, but it's declined. A lot of people were wondering, would Europe be able to hold it up on their own? And so far they have. And they were willing to do that. They were willing to foot the bill to do that. A lot of people, would they be willing to do it? Would they fold, or what would happen when Trump basically rug pulled them? And they did actually come through, and they're mostly funding Ukraine and arming Ukraine themselves, which surprised a lot of people.
I don't know. It's as if you guys are not addressing any position I have, because I think that the United States continues to support Ukraine, and all the United States is doing is trying to legitimize the European oligarchs to take control and start sacrificing themselves against Russia, using Ukraine as a proxy. So the United States is trying to hand that over to Western Europe so the United States can free themselves and focus on Iran first, but then ultimately on China. And so I don't see, you're pretending that my position is that Trump is really friends with Russia and opposed to Ukraine. I don't think that's true. I think Trump is happy. I think Trump is happy to have this proxy war continue against Russia. So
he's an enemy of Russia.
Pull the rug out. You think Trump pulled the rug out of Ukraine? That's what you said. And how did Trump pull the rug out of Ukraine? By trying to force Western Europe.
Trump, in his own words, said he wants Europe to carry their weight. That's been
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the problem is that he's at some point, people in Europe are going to be like, well, okay, we're busting our asses over here. What is the USA even contributing? I think a lot of people in Europe are asking.
That's what the politicians are saying, and they're telling their people, because of this situation, we have to slash social safety nets. We have to double our military spending. Like, this is the whole point. This is the whole purpose. You're never going to get the Europeans to willingly to have a political party in power that's going to slash social safety nets and double defense spending and be used as a proxy against Russia by the oligarch class without what's going on right now. Like, in peacetime, that's just not going to happen. So,
it's just you want everything to be about the USA calling the shots and having absolute power over everyone else, and I think Greg's in agreement that that's not really. I mean, there's limits to the USA.
It's an oligarchy. It's an oligarchy that has captured and runs the USA in their class interest, for their class interest, and their class interest is to have a division of labor, have the oligarchs in Europe take out Russia so that they can move to China. I mean, that's what their big national defense.
Well, okay, let me ask you.
But when all this started, I probably was on a show when we were saying this is what the U.S. is doing instead of declaring that the war is lost. It was handing over a loser to Europe, not thinking it was going to work. So, and I think Ian's right. Europe has risen up a lot more than expected.
What do you mean Europe has risen up a lot more? What does that mean?
I mean, to supply funding and weapons and, aggressive support.
Yeah, no, again, they got Orban out of there. That's going to facilitate further support for Ukraine without Hungary's veto in the EU.
Germany, is going into a lot of debt. Contrary to its history.
I think the West would have been happy to have Russia defeat and collapse, and they would have been happy to have Iran defeat and collapse. But the resilience that both of those countries are showing have not resulted in a strategic rethinking of the West's plans. Like they're dealing with that, and they continue to further their efforts, and so they haven't made a decision to stop trying to cross the river and turn back. They're just feeling their way, and there's every sign is suggesting that they're doubling down and they're going to try and recommit to these efforts of total global domination. We see the C-17s, right? There's an air bridge going from the U.S. to Europe to the Middle East. Like, for what? Like, if the U.S. thinks that they don't have any more military options against Iran,
restock.
Right? But why? Why even bother if you've resigned yourself to there is no military solution against Iran, and we're just going to have to, concede that they're going to be there and they're going to control the street. Like, the obvious reason is because they're looking for a way to opportunistically, win and defeat Iran militarily, and so they haven't given up. It remains unclear exactly how and when what strategies they're going to come up with, but all I'm saying is that it just seems entirely obvious that they haven't given up. And they are going to be looking for ways to escalate. This is not a de-escalation. We are going to escalate. And why? Why are we going to escalate? It's because ultimately you have the Western ownership class that is transnational is not going to be satisfied with having to share global hegemony with countries they can't control. So inevitably they are looking for ways to escalate and to weaken these sovereign countries they can't control. And namely, those three countries right now are Iran, Russia, and China. The effort to destroy, destabilize, and weaken those countries continues in order to, achieve global hegemony for the Western ruling class throughout the rest of the 21st century. That's what this is about. And it's the biggest time in history of this century. And so they feel that their window is closing. Why is their window closing? We've talked about this. Number one, China will have energy independence within maybe 5 years. They are rapidly producing nuclear and coal-fired plants. They will no longer be dependent on energy imports. And so while their economy is still dependent on energy imports, is the time that the United States has to put all these pieces in motion that they have been putting in place for the last 10 years, namely the first and second island chains, right, in ringing China, and also dealing with Iran, dealing with Gulf energy going to China. They want to be able to eliminate China from this, and it's not easy. And their allies are going to suffer. Japan is going to suffer, but Japan is not a shot caller. South Korea is not a shot caller. They are fucking vassals. They are fucking vassals, and they don't get a fucking say. Trump is the capo, and he's working on behalf of the power players. And it's how the class consensus is developed. You know, they've got think tanks, they've got strategies, they've got Pentagon planners, and there's policy papers, there's investments. Like all of this stuff is how the Western transnational, you know, ruling class operates. But I appreciate you guys getting me fired up and forcing me to, you know, articulate what I see. And I'm really curious, you know, what a better understanding is, how, you know, a better perspective, a more accurate perspective that can explain things and predict the future. Because I think, you know, I mean, in my own small mind, like the way I understand things is makes the most sense with regards to what we've seen happen so far and in what's going to happen in the future. Like it all makes sense. And so, you know, I get emotionally motivated to try and hear, you know, counter frameworks, counter understandings. And I want to be persuaded by them, but that if I'm not, I mean, I'm just going to explain why. I'm going to explain why that's not persuasive. But anyway, you guys are good sports. I want to stop talking, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Should I commit myself to the asylum? Yes.
How about skipping that question? How about the Suez Canal crisis as an analog to what's happening? This is a desperate attempt by the U.S. ruling class, not the transnational, who doesn't want this, but the U.S. ruling class to maintain dominance.
Well, the Suez Canal crisis is often considered what broke the British Empire, and you know, that's where the U.S. basically is capital to, but because the British Empire at that point was so mired in debt, they couldn't get out of it. I think you could see. I think there's something very similar happening with the U.S., and I don't know what that's going to be. I mean, I think Greg's right that Europe's going to try to be their own pole. I don't know how successful they're going to be. I mean, what are you going to do without Russian energy and, you know, without the U.S.? I mean, what are they going to do? But, I mean, I can see the other side of it of, you know, the Europe also to say, well, we're just going to wait till the next president who will, you know, restore the norms. But
3 long years. 3 long years.
Right. I think it's true. A lot of people are questioning their partnership. I mean, they have to, because it's like, you know, I mean, really try to think of it. Let's say you're one of these European transnational elites who's loyal to your class. Imagine yourself as one of them. Well, if you're looking at Washington, well, what is Washington giving you? I mean, really, what are they giving you right now?
They're the primary vehicle. They're the primary vehicle that can attain global hegemony and defeat these threats to your class interest, your class power on the planet. And so if you're a Western oligarch, like, you understand that it's do or die. It's the class war. It's we're either going to destroy these, you know, sovereign rivals to our hegemony, or we're going to lose our hegemony. And that's it for us. And China is going to be the new power, and they're communist. You know, so they don't want that. They don't want to share. They don't want to have their freedom curtailed. They want to do whatever they want, anytime they want. And that's what they call it, full spectrum dominance, right? So the Pentagon calls it full spectrum dominance. Total global hegemony is what the vehicle of the United States is offering them. And so a lot of them are probably happy with the status quo, and they might disagree. But this gets me to what I was wanting to, like, kind of talk about, right? So, you know, when we see things through these perspective of class, let's just assume that, you know, you have a class in power, the working class is in power, and they have to decide policy. You're never going to get 100% buy-in from the entirety of your class. There's always going to be dissenters. But, you know, are you going to let the dissenters? Okay, so for instance, when Stalin came to power in the early 30s, you had to industrialize. But a lot of the agricultural landowners in the Soviet Union did not want to industrialize. They liked the status quo. Now, the status quo involved regular famines and a total inadequate agricultural system that could never support industrialization. So what is the ruling, establishment to do? If it identifies worker interests and it tries to work to pursue them, when some of the workers, some of the people are intransigent and do not want to go along with the program. So that's always going to be the case. So you guys are kind of describing, some people that are not happy with what has been decided as the primary interest and that is being pursued. There's some people not happy with that. Of course, because they're being asked to sacrifice. It's their societies that are going to be sacrificed, while the main power, does the heavy lifting, but is also going to be sacrificing too. So you're never going to have 100% buy-in. You're always going to have people saying no, and you have to deal with that. And are you going to let the people that say no interfere and make you reassess what your actual targeted priority is? So in the case of Stalin, do you think the Kulak resistance made him think, you know what, we're not gonna industrialize because look, these people don't want it. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be bloody. We can't. No, he understood we have to industrialize or we will be destroyed within 10 years when the capitalists attack. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so he forced industrialization. And he did it against the will of probably a lot of people. And he's still attacked for it to this very day, because we're talking about class struggle. And so the same thing in the West, it's ruled by the ownership class. They have identified what they need to accomplish to maintain their own global hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century. And they're not going to let, their strategy is going to involve sacrifice. There's no way you can win this war without sacrifice. So they're going to sacrifice Europe. They're going to sacrifice Japan, South Korea. They're going to sacrifice the working class of the United States, in order to attain the freedom that that they have to have by defeating these impediments, these obstacles to their rule. And again, when you look at their strategic documents, I mean, that's what it says. It says, number one, Homeland Security. Number two, containing China. You're not going to contain China by not embargoing China. You're not going to contain China without harming the global economy. So it just seems like this is the inevitable
right,
future.
but you're also not going to contain China if you economically wreck all of the Asian allies that are supposed to do the fighting for us.
Okay, well, the point is, I have an answer for that. The point is that everybody is going to go down, but China is going to go down a lot less than the U.S. is, and the United States is going to go down. But relative to China, they'll emerge from this in a much stronger situation in relation to China. Like the hope
you believe
is
that that's you think that's
Greg.
what they think.
Fuck no.
Okay.
I don't believe that. It's good. It's a failed.
Right.
It's a failed effort. It's futile, and it's evil. It's fucking wrong. But that's what they're going to do. Nevertheless, that's what's happening. So this is what motivates what animates my emotions and gets me because I mean this is the inevitable result of the reality of class. And they're thinking in terms of class. They don't care about anything but their class, and they're identifying threats to their class interests, their core class interests, and they're going to move against them, and that's going to plunge the entire world into a catastrophe. So that's the direction we're headed. I hope they can realize the futility of their efforts and pull back. But I think we're going to see it under Trump, right? I think Trump is the whole reason because, again, this allows Trump to take all the blame for doing all these bad things that nobody wants, and then they can come behind him and say, we didn't want that. Trump did it. But now that we're here, now that we're here, and the world is in cinders, but guess what? China's in a much worse place than we are, and we'll blame Trump for being the Hitler of the 21st century, but we're at the same time we're going to benefit from the situation they caused. So that's their hope. I don't think that's going to happen. That's just that's what I see is playing out. So I like Ian's look. It is suggestive that I do commit myself to the facility. So yeah, I mean, I don't. Nothing else makes sense, right? And so I guess it's possible that the West will realize the futility of doing all of this, but they are just pursuing the steps necessary to do this with such overt and predictable, because I mean, I predicted this, right? I predicted Trump would win. I predicted he would attack Iran, and I didn't specifically predict the Venezuela thing, but it makes total sense in terms of monopolizing global energy in order to weaponize this monopoly against China. And when you do that, if you weaponize global energy against China, it's going to cause a significant global problem with the global economy. And I think the West hopes they can manage this. They can manage this global recession, this global depression, this decline in a way that, again, they put all the pain onto countries that don't really matter or their rivals, China, Iran, and Russia, and that they limit the pain to themselves. But so you guys let me do a lot of talking, and you probably didn't do it willingly. I probably made you listen and didn't allow you to respond. But I'm waiting to see a sea change. I'm waiting to see the United States stop trying to do this and to pull back. And I haven't seen this. And this ceasefire, that's not it. Because we see the C-17s, bringing more munitions to the theater every day. And so that is, indicative of further plans for military aggression. So I don't see the ceasefire lasting. I see ultimately they're going to just go ahead and destroy all the producing capacity in West Asia, because that's going to be all they can do. They're not going to be able to just destroy Iran's. They're not going to be able to control Iran's. And when they just try and destroy only Iran's, Iran will retaliate because they have the capacity. So that's the near term. The near term is dealing with West Asia before you do a real pivot to China. And it'll be interesting, what they hope to accomplish with this embargo. Greg, I agree with you. Like, this Chinese ship probably did not get interdicted. And so the question is, how long will that continue? If the United States does try and interdict, a Chinese, an energy tanker destined for China, what is China's response? So these are all going to be really significant and interesting developments. But again, to think that the United States has given up on their ambition, the Western oligarchy has given up on their ambition to, significantly weaken and deteriorate Iran, Russia, and China, in order to not have, any obstacles to their freedom. That has not happened. That has not happened.
Well, okay, so I need to make dinner soon, so I only sign out soon. But my closing thought will be, we've been doing this show, I guess, 4 years now. I think it will be another 4 years, and there will still have been no blockade or containing China. We will still be talking, and there will still be no movement.
That would be extremely surprising, and that would be fatal to my understanding. And I will admit I am wrong. There's no way that they're going to let Trump out of office before they make him,
So that's a timeline. That's a clear timeline.
No, for sure. So, Trump is their vehicle. Okay. They have to do everything under Trump because they have to come behind him and say, hey, that wasn't us, it was Trump. So Trump is their vehicle. The United States is their vehicle under Trump. And so they're going to exploit that vehicle to maximum effect and maximum potential. So yeah, if Trump leaves office and there's peace in our time, no, I'm out to lunch. I am a moron. It's possible. Any closing thoughts, Greg? We're sorry. I mean, yeah, I feel bad because I end up just putting forth my narrow, rigid, dogmatic view that nobody really agrees with, and so I'm not sure how much you guys enjoy that. But Greg, final thoughts before we conclude?
I think watching the U.S. response to the markets will be the key driver, keeping interest rates from going too high and oil going too high. That whatever, to the extent that the U.S. has grandiose visions like you're describing, that'll be the arbiter of escalation and de-escalation.
I said last word and I lied because I want to point out that they've already significantly damaged the global economy. What has already happened. And so even though it's only $100, that is a fake number, and it really is going to be a lot higher.
But they've worked hard to keep it below 100. Right,
but what does it sell for in West Asia? It's like, I mean, 150, right? Like there's different prices of oil, and so there's like a real price, and then there's the Western price, and there's a huge chasm between these two prices that people say you can't maintain that chasm for very long, and they're going to get closer to each other, which means
right. I mean, there's a lot of weirdness in the oil market, but you know, the benchmarks are what seems to be driving the U.S. escalation and de-escalation.
Yeah, and they have not confirmed my framework and my hypothesis by just allowing it to go out of control. They have put a lot of effort into keeping it low and not spooking the market and not tipping their hand that this is what they're going to inevitably do. That's how I would characterize it. But okay, Greg, thank you so much. We have not had you on for a long time, and I love your analysis, and we agree on almost everything. But we always focus on our disagreements. So, and then Ian, thank you for co-hosting with me. I will let you have dinner, and we will probably reconvene on this coming Fridays, I'm pretty sure. And who knows what will happen between now and then. We look forward to it. Thank you, all the viewers. Thank you for your comments. We'll see you on Friday.